All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As a quick note, we are recording this session. A copy of the event will be shared in your Waterloo Ready Learn course within the next week. Just a reminder for everyone that's participating, particularly for our panelists, if you can just make sure your microphone is on mute for now, that would be great. All right. Also, we think it's important before we start today by acknowledging that the University of Waterloo is on lands that are deeply connected to the Indigenous peoples who have historically lived and who currently live in this territory. These groups include the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is located on the Holman Tract, the land promised to the Six Nations that includes 10 kilometers on each side of the Grand River. My name is Michael Wood, and I'm the Associate Director of Undergrad in the School of Environment, Enterprise, and Development. And so I am the de facto Director of the Environment and Business Program, and I'll be your host today. For today, what we'll be doing is we're going to go through a slide presentation, which some of you may have seen on our webpage. Once we're done with the slide presentation, we'll then proceed with a panel Q&A discussion with some of our esteemed guests who I'll introduce in just one moment. We are certainly looking forward to connecting with all of our new environment and business students. If there are any parents or supporters joining us today, we want to point out there are a few resources that are available specifically for you. And it is my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed group of panelists. So as you will see, as I mentioned before, I am Michael Wood, Associate Director, Undergrad Studies for the School of Environment, Enterprise, and Development. We also have joining us today, you'll see her at the top of your screen, and maybe each of our panelists can wave once once I introduce them. Cheri Oestrich is the Environment and Business Academic Advisor. So she is the go-to person for all questions related to your program, course selection, or any issues you may have in terms of navigating your way through the program. We're also fortunate to have Bennett join us today, who's a 2B MBUS student and also the co-president of the Waterloo Environment and Business Society. So he's excited to be participating today and bring his energy that I've known that he brings to the class and back to when he started as a first year some time ago. We're also fortunate to have two of our senior environment and business students with us. So Sam Kanemy. Sam is also one of our superstar students and someone who has lots to contribute, not only to the program, but also to our community. And then also Lauren Petropoulos. She's also a fourth year environment and business student. And the neat thing about both Sam and Lauren is that they're just finishing up their co-op right now. They've been on an 8-month co-op. So if you have any co-op specific questions, you might want to ask them or direct those questions to them specifically. All right, so let's get going. So here are some of the questions we're hoping to cover today. And ultimately what we're trying to do is, by no means are we restricting ourselves to these questions, but really what the spirit of what we're trying to do is set you up to succeed. So it's about highlighting some of those main differences between high school and university. We know that you're all high performers in high school, and we want to help you in that transition to being high performers in university, not only as students, but also in your growth as individuals. So also we're going to talk about what's expected of you as a Waterloo Warrior student. Also some of the important dates. University is very much scheduled around a pretty tight timeline, and so we want to give you that information so that you'll be prepared for what is coming in the fall. Also, we'll be talking about what courses are like, what you can expect, and how those are somewhat different than what you've experienced to date, and then also general information about navigating the process. So in high school, your teachers may not have required you to prepare for class ahead of time. That changes in university. What's expected generally is that you'll prepare before attending class, lecture, or labs, or tutorials. Okay, so you'll be doing that work ahead of time, preparing to understand what are some of the concepts that we'll be covering by way of readings. Some instructors will post their lectures ahead of time so that you have a chance to understand where the conversation is going. What we typically see is that 20% of the learning that happens will happen in the classroom, and 80% is independent learning. Okay, that's pretty much a direct flip from how high school your high school experience, where 80% of that learning happened in class, or even time within classes devoted to helping you complete homework assignments and so on. And 20% was left on your own to do that on your own time. So ultimately, what does that mean when we have this flip in terms of where you're spending your time? What's expected is that there's going to be more independent learning that's happening. Okay, this has a big impact in terms of your time management and how you're navigating that work-life balance. And so that's what we want to talk about today. In some cases, you'll be on your own to complete the readings or doing your assignments. In other cases, there may be group work that's required, and so scheduling that and trying to connect with your group mates to complete tasks becomes really important. And so ultimately what we want to do is we want to create some good habits around time management early on so that the transition is that much easier for you, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to cover some of those strategies today. But first off, I'm going to just turn this over to a question that I have prepared for Bennett. So I wanted to know, since you're closest to making that transition from high school to university, what did you find was the most significant difference between high school and university?
When I first showed up in that first NBUS 102 class, I was kind of thinking the same thing about, what am I seeing and what am I going to see that's different. I would say the main thing that I really noticed throughout my first year was just the difference in where support can come from. So in high school, it was very much the teachers were making the effort to support me and reach out to me if they saw I was struggling or any other students were struggling. They had a lot of the coordination responsibilities. They gave you the deadlines. They reminded you of the deadlines. Whereas in university, I found that I relied a lot more on other students and people in residential life, dons and stuff like that. And it's kind of been more on me as a student to seek out those resources. They're not just going to be there for me to, or given to me, and no one's really looking after me besides me. And so it's kind of on the student to really make sure that they're accessing those resources and doing everything they can to have a successful time for themselves.
Great, thanks, Bennett. I think that's a really great point. And support services and support generally is something we'll cover as we move through the presentation. Thanks very much. Okay, so this table that I'm presenting here highlights some of the main differences between high school and university. Certainly, it's important for students to know that generally there is less class time, you'll note, in terms of the time that you're spending in the classroom, but it requires much more time in terms of managing what happens outside of that structured time. And so what we mean by this is that really there needs to be, much like Bennett was mentioning, in terms of connecting to support through your studies. It's also having that internal motivation to keep yourself on track in terms of completing tasks as required. If, for example, you're going to be a student who's living on campus, no one's going to get you up in the morning. No one's going to make sure you're getting to class on time. No one's making sure you're eating your breakfast or, engaging in all that self-care that's so important. And so this really routines and establishing that time management is critical. It's typical for many of you will certainly are top performers in your studies in high school. And one of the biggest challenges that students have in that transition is seeing their grades drop a little bit, right? So we typically see grades will shift about 10% from where they were in high school to university. And that's not because you're not smart, but rather we're training you in a specific way of thinking and have different expectations. Now I'm going to pose a question to Lauren. So the question I have for you, Lauren, is what did you find was the hardest adjustment for you in your transition to university? So it doesn't necessarily have to be restricted to these topics in the table, but if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think if I'm looking at the topics in this table first, I would say a big adjustment for me was the weighting of different assessments, especially based on each different course that you're taking. You're going to have different distribution of types of assessments as well. So you may have more assignment-based courses or some courses that will just have 2 exams, and really managing my time based on that and figuring out how early I would have to start studying and reviewing my course material for each of those assessments. And then maybe outside of the classroom, I definitely found a big adjustment was getting that work and life balance, especially once you start getting involved in maybe extracurriculars after class, and also balancing that social life when you start to meet people through your program or in other different curriculars that you do at Waterloo. So, and then also when co-op comes into play, that's another thing that you would have to start balancing. So yeah, definitely readjusting and figuring out what works best in terms of your study habits, but then also balancing everything else that comes in after that.
Great, thanks, Lauren. That's awesome. Yeah, it's I think for each of our attendees today, you'll see that there's a reoccurring theme. And again, the great panelists that we have joining us today with Lauren, Bennett, and Sam, they've all been heavily engaged and connected and are really strong students. So we've included them because they're really great examples of how to structure that time and to be successful, not only in the classroom, but across all the different areas of life. All right. So when thinking about how you're planning to use your time this coming term, it's important to remember to include some of the following tasks in your schedule, or at least keep them in mind when you're thinking about how much time you have available. So it's common for us to underestimate how much time seemingly small tasks take and how important they are to include when you're estimating how much time you actually have available. So if you consider your first year, what you do before, during, and after class will greatly impact your success in the classroom. So how well you balance your tasks, your academics, your work life, as we call it, will depend on you. And to Bennett's point, right? No one's going to manage that for you. That's something that requires that you step up and you take charge of your own agenda. This balance is important and certainly a component to your success, but it's also important in terms and relies on not only yourself, but again, you're not in isolation, but to draw on the support that we offer ourselves as, myself as the academic, the program director, for Cheri as the academic advisor, and for all of our upper year students. We really do try and support you through that process. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to be thinking about, making sure that we're paying reasonable attention to all of these different aspects, not just completing our assignments on time. Now, a question for Sam. Knowing what you know now, what would you tell your first year self?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, looking back on the past, 4 years of my life, probably one of my biggest regrets, I would say, going into my first year and second year would be, not capitalizing so much on the academic resources that my professors and the university provides us. So in high school, I remember myself, focusing so much on the marks, I just need to get this mark so I can get into this program. And learning was more so about the marks than it was actual knowledge retention. But then I kind of carried that mindset into my first and second year. So I was kind of, just doing what I needed to do to get the marks that I wanted. And I wasn't focusing on, all of the learning potential that's being provided to you by the university. So really what I would say is go into school, into university, focusing on learning. Focus on learning as much as you can, because really what you're doing here is preparing for real life. This time is meant to be preparing you for the workplace, preparing you for your career. And there's so many resources. Your profs are going to be providing you with many, articles, academic articles that are circulating. There's so much information being provided to you. So really kind of take that information and really try to soak it all in. Read the chapters in the textbooks that the profs are giving to you, because that knowledge is really going to benefit you once you leave university, especially in co-op jobs and stuff. If you are knowledgeable on things that interest you, you'll be able to implement that into the workplace. And then you'll be able to, network yourself accordingly. And I think that's really, really important to do. So kind of try to take a step back if you find yourself getting stressed about marks, about assignments and stuff like that, and just say, okay, the marks are not what's important here. What's important is I'm learning as much as I can. And, the topics that are interesting to you, research them, dive deep into them, ask questions. There's so many people in the Faculty of Environment that are there for you, that know so much information. So take those resources and really use them to your advantage, and really try to prepare yourself the best you can for the workplace. So it's not so much about, the marks that you're receiving. Don't worry so much about that. Just try to focus on, what interests you, dive deep into those topics, and try to learn as much as you can.
Great, Sam, that's awesome. And what awesome advice to have coming into a first year, right? It's, there's a lot of effort made in terms of developing that expertise and knowledge and coming up with creative ways to share that knowledge. And so that's a really great point of, you get out what you put in, right? And that's, I think, a really important takeaway. And yeah, thanks very much. All right. So now what we're going to do, we're going to just shift and have a look at some of the expectations around the environment and business program specifically. So the first topic that we're going to cover is looking at what your first year suite of courses look like. And so for this, you will have in the fall 4 courses that are predetermined. And so you would have already been pre-enrolled in those by the university. You also have the option of 1 elective. And so Cheri, maybe you could speak to some of the options that students have, and perhaps popular options that students have taken.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, as Sam was mentioning, it's really good to tap into other areas of that you might be interested in. Some popular electives that students tend to take are psychology, French, history, human resource management. There's entrepreneurship courses. This really is an opportunity for you to dive into some other areas of interest that you may have, and you can get that by doing that through your electives. Over the 4 years, you will have 10 electives in order, like 10 courses that you get to choose on your own. And those courses are listed in the undergrad calendar and on or the schedule of classes. So it really is a broad spectrum of courses that are out there for you to take. Kind of really depends on your own interests.
Great, Cheri, thank you. Now, it's also important, I think, to note that by no means do you have to take an elective in fall semester. Some students find that, the transition from high school to university life, there's many different variables that are changing, perhaps living in a new city or a new country, living in residence. These are all big transitions that happen. And so some students elect to just take the 4 pre-registered courses and then leave that 1 elective that you can pick up at many different opportunities along your journey through the program. So again, that's something that you could have a conversation with Cheri about to figure out what fits best, and she can guide you through that. Great. Okay, now in terms of the academic expectations, so there are 20 academic units that are required for you to graduate. And so in the 4 pre-registered courses that you'll be taking in the fall, those each count as half a unit. So after successful completion of those 4, you would have 2 academic units completed. We also have a minimum of 4 work terms. So that's 4 4-month work terms. You have the option of a 5th as well. And that's what both Lauren and Sam are coming off of. So they've done a double, so 2 work terms together, which is their 8-month work placement, which is in their last year, before their last year of courses. We also have a minimum of 4 professional development courses. So these are courses that help you in terms of preparing for the job market. So specifically building skills and knowledge and expertise in terms of being able to be successful in the workplace. We also have work term reports, which we require students to complete. And this is really the opportunity to reflect on your experience, because the learning that happens is not restricted, as to Sam's point, is not restricted just to what happens in the classroom, right? The learning that you'll have at Waterloo happens, a lot of the learning happens actually on placement when you're out in the workforce, but also through your extracurriculars as well as some of the other activities that students engage in. But we've set it up deliberately that work term reports are a point to reflect on your experiences. Also, I wanted to highlight the differences between what we have our cumulative overall average and our cumulative major average. So these are the minimum requirements to stay in the program. Students often see this and they get worried about it, right? But it's just to say, if you find that you're struggling or you're close to that, that line, Cheri and I can support you in trying to figure out ways to shore up your average. Again, it might mean reducing one of your courses, but we have an overall minimum cumulative average of 65, so that's across all the courses you've taken. And then we have a minimum cumulative major average of 70, which is just the required courses of the program, okay? And everyone is required to take an English language requirement. That's for domestic as well as international students. And that's just so that you're taught how to communicate at a university level. Getting that wrong. There we go. Okay, we now, as I mentioned at the outset, we have important dates and course information, so we'll touch on those right now. So what you'll see in front of you now is a slide that talks about some of the important dates, okay? And as I mentioned at the outset, we have really strict deadlines at the university. If you're a day late and a dollar short, it usually has a pretty negative consequence in terms of whether you're trying to, for instance, add a class, drop a class during those given periods. So what that, maybe Cheri, I'm going to turn this over to you in terms of explaining what each of these means, particularly around the drops, because I think students will understand how to, what adding a class means. But if you could speak to that, that would.
Okay. Yeah, so the first one, drop no penalty, September 28th. If you're finding your coursework is too heavy, if you drop a course by this date, which is really only 3 weeks into the start of class, the course comes right off your transcript. You get 100% refund for that particular course, and there's no penalty on your transcript at all. It's like you never signed up for the course. After that date, up until November 23rd, it counts as a WD, which stands for withdrawal. And basically that has no impact on your transcript other than the fact that it will show up as a WD. At that point as well, you get 50% back of the course. After the 24th of November, it becomes a WF, which you don't want to get to this stage, a withdrawal fail, and a grade of 32 is calculated into your average. So it's really important to keep these dates in mind if you are experiencing too much volume or looking at dropping courses, which I would recommend that you reach out to me first regarding dropping any courses, and we can have a discussion on how that looks like moving forward. And basically, like Mike said before, you don't have to take an elective first term, and when you do end up dropping some courses, if you need to, it's easy picking up courses later, either on a co-op term, you can take a course, your first term off. So you have some options on picking up courses that you missed if you end up dropping them. Is that good?
Great. Thanks, Cheri. Yeah, that's excellent. And I think it's important to note that, again, you'll have these reoccurring important dates throughout your time at university. And you can find that important dates calendar is available on the Quest website. And it's not within your Quest account per se, but on the actual Quest website. Also, these important dates will be loaded into the portal. Again, I'll be talking about both of these a little bit later. So what to expect in terms of classes. So for this fall, given the current COVID situation, our classes will be held online. So this is different from what most of our students have experienced thus far, as well as our professors. But anyway, what you can expect is for the lectures that will be occurring online, most of them are being delivered asynchronously. In other words, they'll be pre-recorded. So there won't be a live component in terms of the professor you having to log in at a set time to experience that particular lecture. However, if you were in class, what you would expect is that you'd have anywhere from 2 to 3 lectures a week. That typically will happen when, generally from an hour and a half to an hour for those 2 to 3. We have 3 hours of contact time a week. Classes range from first year of about 100 in my MBUS 102 class up to about 300. And so that's pretty standard for first year classes. And then as you move along through the program, the class size decreases, right? To, when you're in a 3rd or 4th year elective, you maybe have 30 to 40 students in your class. All right. And one thing that's going to be important, again, given that we're going to be working remotely, is finding a place that's comfortable for you to work. So if that's in your dorm room, if you happen to be living on campus, or if you have an office space or your bedroom at home, whatever works best for you, but it's going to be really important to make sure that you have that functioning workspace. Okay, so some of the important information that you'll receive, and again, this is set around the first day of lectures, but really what's going to happen is it will be the first week of class, right? Classes, given that they're online this year, will be set up in a weekly structure. But what generally happens for that first lecture is that you will have, you get general information about the course. So what happens in the course, which is contained within the syllabus, navigating the online material, and then also being introduced to your instructor as well as any TAs. Teaching assistants are those usually upper year graduate students that are there to support the professor in a learning capacity. So generally there'll be, in some cases, tutorials that you'll be meeting with other students and the TA to go over questions and to help you in terms of that knowledge, content mastery, and building your knowledge around the concepts covered in the class. So I mentioned the syllabus. So again, this is others, and you may have heard this before, a course outline, but basically what this material includes is all the important information about a course. So it will include the instructor's name, their office contact information, office hours. So in my case, I will be having live office hours come this fall. So that will be a time where you can connect with me if you have questions related to MBUS 102, and we can discuss those. Also, what it will include is a course description. So this is a very general overview in terms of what the course covers, and then also discusses some of the learning objectives or learning outcomes that we have for that particular course. We also include within this all the required materials you'll need. So this would be perhaps a textbook that's going to be required, or readings by week, right? So that's something, again, where you can find all that information in one place. As others have mentioned already, in terms of the assessments, so one of the important things is the evaluation structure that we'll cover. So that is, do we have many assignments, or are there big exams that we are administering? So that's something to be aware of and identify what are the expectations, but also when those assignments are due. And then also we have a lot of the institutional required statements which relate to policies around academic integrity, discipline, and support services available to students. So the way to think of a syllabus or course outline is that it is really the contract that you have between yourself as the student and your professor. For doing these particular things, you will receive a grade, right? And that is the relationship that you have with the professor. Okay. Now, in terms of some tips for success, so as you've heard from our panelists so far, there are many things that we can do in terms of setting up that support, right? That helps us because you will experience some lumpy times, right? Things are going to get busy, and this transition from home life to university life, in terms of your geographical location, may not change, but just in terms of the expectations and the dynamics will change. So as we mentioned, the university is different, and so it's going to require a little bit, different attention to some of these transition points. What's interesting is you may find that, as you're going through that, you see that you're working really hard and, maybe struggling with some of the material, whereas some of your friends or colleagues, they have more free time than you, right? And that's okay. right? Everybody's running their own race, right? It's completely normal that some people are going to, find certain concepts or certain aspects easier. Maybe you're a really good writer, right? And one of your friends isn't. Maybe you're really good at working in teams when other people may find that a real challenge working with others, right? So it's okay that be different. But what's interesting to note is that, in contrast to high school, you are all bright, smart, talented students because you wouldn't have been accepted into university had you not been, okay? And so what's different is that in contrast to high school, where you are surrounded with students who may have put in effort and may not have put in effort in terms of their studies, but now you're surrounded by peers who have all put effort in, right? And so you're all bright, you're all talented, but that's, that's why we come together. We're able to push each other in that learning environment. And it's just to say that, we're there to support each other through this process, not only across, the cohorts, so from upper year students to first year students, but then also in terms of professors and our support staff as well. So as Bennett had mentioned, some of the important, having to seek out support is really an important part of university. So you've met Cheri. She is the person to go to in terms of questions related to program requirements, your course planning, your course load if you feel it's too much, as well as academic support in general. Are you requiring perhaps some guidance related to test taking or time management, right? We've heard that's a really important topic that we all would benefit from. Also, in terms of the academic and life skills, so we have a great resource on campus called the Student Success Office, and they provide all kinds of great support, whether it's through, helping us with working through teams or being able to, through the Writing and Communication Center, helping us communicate or work on papers that we might have for our courses. Also, from a social perspective, we have environmental, the faculty environment has peer mentors, and what the peer mentors do are there to help support you through this transition. We also have, as I mentioned at the outset, Bennett is representing the Waterloo Environment and Business Society, so WEBS, you'll hear a lot about them, and I'm sure Bennett will give a plug a little bit later in terms of some of the exciting things they have planned for the fall. And then also, more generally, across the university, we have the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association, WUSA. And so this is the body that represents all undergrad students across all 6 of our faculties. We also, as we mentioned, work-life balance is a really important part, right? So this relates to wellness. And so we have counseling services that are there helping you in terms of, should you need support or, as times get tough, this is one of the great resources that we communicate with regularly. Also in terms of health services, if you happen to get sick, should you be living on campus? And then also in terms of our athletics programs that we have available in clubs as well. All important. You can see a very well-rounded approach to your university experience. Okay. So again, as I mentioned, one of the big challenges that we're trying to instill in you at this point is the importance of finding balance. So when we think about this, simply working harder doesn't always equal better results, right? We know, and research supports this, that creativity actually is enhanced if we take breaks, right? And those breaks could be, oh, I want to go to the gym, or I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to play, if you're a gamer, right? Get back into your character, whatever it is for you. But it's important to take those breaks. It's also important to schedule in time for fun, right? This isn't just about, we're not training robots to go out and just, work all the time. It's about making sure and getting the most out of your university experience. So as Sam mentioned, right, it's, not only embracing like the knowledge and information that you have at your disposal, but, taking advantage of getting to know your peers. And, we come from all different walks of life, all different parts of the globe. And, being able to learn from each other and have time to share together and have some fun is really, really important. This is the only time, believe it or not, that you'll be surrounded by people who of your own age with similar interests who are on the same schedule. So if there was ever a time to, find an opportunity to build those connections, to build those relationships, I still have friends of mine that I had from when I was in first year university. And it's because of this parallel in terms of interests, scheduling, and age. And also finally, how do we find that balance? And one of the things, I was going to turn this over to our panelists just for a quick comment. So maybe just in 1 or 2 words, we'll go through each of you. So Bennett, if you could go first, how do you find balance?
For myself, it's very, very individual, but for me, I like to structure my workday in terms of a 9-to-5 job. So I will plan out my week with all the assignments, readings, meetings within my 9-to-5 schedule, so that after 5 p.m., computer goes away, and those things that I need to do to keep myself healthy and my mental health up and my physical health, all those things happen after, so it's like a typical work day.
Great, thanks, Bennett. That's awesome, and sets you up really well for co-op, right? Because that is going to be typically your work day, right? So it's not only what happens in while you're on campus, but also when you're in the workplace. Okay, Lauren?
Yeah, I would say to find balance, I've definitely had to learn how to prioritize myself and what that means for me. So I do like my alone time, for example, getting to sit down and just read a book I enjoy or watch a movie. But then also I've really found that being around friends and having those social experiences really do benefit me and really leave me energized for the next day. So even in the pandemic, scheduling virtual game nights or just scheduling a chat or Netflix party with friends. I've actually been doing that with the co-op students from this summer. So that's been really nice to just kind of keep those social interactions going, even if they have to be virtually or in a distanced situation.
Great, thank you. And Sam?
Yeah, for me, much the same as Bennett and Lauren, but I think it's really beneficial to me to schedule in things that I enjoy. So usually during school, I'll have a set, workout routine that I'll do during the week, and I'll have set times that I, do things other than school. So I'll have set times for, prayer. I'll have set times for working out, and I'll have, much like Bennett, I won't allow myself to kind of do work on, like a Saturday night. That will kind of be like my one night where it's like, okay, I'm off. And if I have like a big midterm on Monday, I'll still try my best to kind of like, take that time off just to kind of reset my brain so that I can, go full force the next morning. And it's really important for me to, kind of wake up early in the morning so that I have time to do all of these things, make my bed, something as simple as that, so that I can, be focused and kind of, motivate myself through small things like that.
That's great. Thank you very much. Those are all really great recommendations, and it's not surprising that you are all successful students as well as successful colleagues and peers. So that's great. Okay. So as I mentioned, some of the resources that you have at your disposal, one of the other tips for success is making sure that we're familiar with all of our means of communication. So Waterloo uses these 4 main vectors for communicating with you. So Quest is where you can pay your tuition, enroll in courses, see final grades, request transcripts, and all that kind of information. Your Waterloo email address is going to be really important, as this is the main form of communication between professors and staff to you. So we generally don't respond to email if it's from a Gmail account, for example, because we don't know that it's actually you. So that's important if you haven't yet logged into your UWaterloo email, please do so. And what many students do is they'll actually forward email from their other email sources or from their UWaterloo account to their primary email account. So just so that you're not missing any of that really important information. Portal is where you'll connect relating to anything from where you can volunteer or extracurricular activities, different food options that you have on campus, bus schedule, all that type of information that really relates to living on campus, if you will, and experiencing campus, whether you live here or you're living off campus and then coming to campus. And then finally, Learn is where this is the portal for all of your online learning, whether you're in class or we're in an online environment. This is your primary mechanism for submitting assignments, as well as for completing any online coursework. So again, we've talked about seeking balance. Again, I'm going to turn this over to Cheri because we've touched on most of these points already. But Cheri, what in your experience in your role as an academic advisor, do you think is the most important skill for students in being successful at university?
That's a good question. I would say basically find it out what makes you happy, and time management. Time management is huge, as mentioned from all three other students. Planning time for your work, for your school, for your social life, and just trying to find the right balance between all of those things. I know I've written out a lot of time management schedules for students, and they actually end up realizing how much time they actually have in a day, and if not in a week, to be able to, sleep 7 hours, study for 7 hours, and they still have like 7 hours of extra time that, you can spend doing something, creative, getting involved, doing something social. It's all about kind of finding out what makes you happy and trying to plan that all together.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Time management is for sure one of the most important things that I see with students. And, students that come in with good discipline in terms of scheduling their time often have a much easier transition to university life. All right. And now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is around so as I mentioned before, one of the ways in which you can become more effective, and each of our panelists has touched on the importance of time management to varying degrees, but one of the ways that we can do that and to be successful at that is to break down. You heard Bennett, for example, talk about each assignment and readings that he had built into his 9-to-5 schedule, right? What he's done is he's broken down those big assignments into smaller manageable chunks, right? So that it's not such a big task to, I have this big paper coming up and now where do I begin, right? Also in terms of, as we think about that, by breaking those things down and planning and having good time management, what it does is it decreases that procrastination. So what we mean by that is because the tasks are smaller and more manageable, it's less intimidating to start it, right? You're not jumping into writing that 10-page paper straight away. What you're doing is saying, what is the the topic that I want to write on, or what's my thesis statement, and I'm going to work on that and think about that. What are some of the readings that I could pull in and start structuring an outline for that particular assignment, right? So breaking those pieces down into smaller tasks decreases that procrastination. Also, we find what it does is it ultimately will help increase the motivation, because now you're not just stuck doing those small tasks. What you're doing is you've now created space, as each of our panelists have mentioned, to do all those other important things, right? As opposed to just being work all the time, you're able to balance and manage life as it comes to you. What this ultimately does, because we're able to have a greater hold on our approach to our studies as well as our life, is that it ultimately is going to decrease our stress. One of the things that leads to is, for many of us, is the opportunity to get some sleep, which is something that, you hear stories about students pulling all-nighters. I've pulled several in my time before I had good time management skills. And so one of the things that we want to do is, and to be mindful of, is that when we get busy or when we get stressed, often our self-care and those things that actually fill up our tank and help us manage stress fall to the wayside. And so one of those is sleeping well, eating well, getting exercise, taking time for mental health or prayer, whatever it is for you. These are all important things that can help you in that regard, and important to schedule them in and to not let them slip off the table. And at the end of the day, what does that mean? you become more productive, you become more efficient in terms of how you use your time, okay? So what I want to do now is we're going to turn to our chat and see some of the questions that have come in. If you have any questions now, please feel free to post those. We're excited to answer them. We have, you have our attention, our undivided attention for the next 12 minutes or so, and we'd be excited to answer any questions you may have.
Just while we wait for some questions, I just thought I would mention one more thing. In first year, I was unaware of all the minors that you could take and, you know, certificate options that are available. So Waterloo has a really great web page. I can try to link that, that lists all the opportunities for minors and certificates that you can get throughout the 4 or 5 years that you're on campus. And I would strongly suggest doing that because there's many interesting things that you can go into, such as, you know, international development, geography, legal studies, econ. The list is pretty big. So if you find something that interests you in first year, you know, really consider doing a minor and start that early so that it's not, you know, pushed back till 4th year where you have to get all those courses in.
That's great, Sam. Thank you very much. Yeah, if you wanted to post that link to me or to all attendees, that would be great. And then we can, they can have access to that. We do have a couple questions that are coming in. So I see one from Jordan. Jordan's interested to know, do you recommend getting textbooks prior to classes or after the first class? Maybe each of you could, I see Bennett was shaking his head. So maybe, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm a strong proponent of getting the textbooks after the syllabus week. You know, there's each professor teaches in their own way and will use the book to a varying degree. So getting a feel for what that's going to look like and what your year might look like in terms of, you know, basically learning straight from the book like I do for my human resources class right now. Or if it's a class like NBUS 102, which is more provided article focused. You know, I even shared a textbook for InDev with my buddy because I knew that we could manage the readings together and we could save some money on that. So I'm a big proponent of holding off. Okay,
that's great. You'll be excited to know as well for NBUS 102, I mentioned before, I'm the instructor. There will be no required textbooks, so all of the readings and resources are available free of charge to you. So that's something that is done deliberately to make sure that, you know, you can, I think that probably from the experience I've had with my former students, that you know how to spend your $100 better than I can. So yeah, we'll keep the money in your pocket. So we have a couple other questions here. So Meadow asked a question, in what year do you select a minor or how do you do that? Cheri, did you?
Yeah, I can answer that. This is turning on my microphone. I'll send out information in second year. It's basically, there's a form, you basically fill it out and it gets added onto your Quest account. Again, there's so many options in minors. The one that Sam is sending out, is that for just environment, Sam?
No, I believe it's for all of them, and it also has the certificates as well.
For the faculty environment?
Yeah, it has the faculty of environment ones, but it also has all the minor options available at the University of Waterloo.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, because like what Sam is mentioning, there's many to choose from biology to accounting to history, and they all kind of have different requirements. A lot of them require between 8 and 10 courses, meeting a 65 or 70 average. And a lot of students will do at least one minor. Some can fit a minor and an option in or a minor and a specialization. So that'd be a good link to have.
Okay, thanks, Cheri. And I think that also answers Selma's question, which was how many electives do we need to make it a minor? And again, on that, it will depend on the specific minor, but that link that Sam has shared in the chat will provide that information. But again, Cheri is a great resource and can talk to you when the time comes about making that selection. Many of our students, I would say, and by no means am I encouraging you to go this route, but many students decide that they want to have an econ minor, economics minor, for example. That's one that's quite common. So again, that would be something that Cheri or other upper year students can also provide some guidance on. Okay.
Yeah, I'm doing that right now, actually, Dr. Wood. I'm currently filling out that form myself to do my econ. I'm taking 2 Oestrich, which is about banking now. So.
Cool. Well, good choice. I wish you fun on that journey.
I would just add to that the econ minor is a little bit easier to get because you're already taking 3 or 4 courses within the EB program. So a lot of students will add that particular one on because they only need 4 or 5 extra econ courses.
Great. Thanks, Cheri, for highlighting that. That's awesome. Nahida has a question here. As students registered in co-op programs, what do you think is the most we can do to make sure we secure our first co-op job? You know, and I remember each of you in that first period when you're getting lined up for interviews and the stressful time that comes. But yeah, this is a great question, Nahida. Thank you, because it, you know, what can students do to set themselves up for a successful first co-op?
I think for your first co-op, never cut any job out of your options. So there's going to be, you're going to think that you have an idea of what you want to do, but there's so many options out there. Try not to limit yourself. Apply to jobs that you might never have thought that you would enjoy. Because your first co-op, that gives you time, you still have time to, you know, really see what's out there, what options you have, what you like, what you don't like, gain experience, and network yourself. So really just don't put any job off the table. Apply to things that, you know, you might not have expected to apply to, and take every interview seriously, because if you only get matched with one job, then, you know, you don't want to have to you don't want to blow that interview kind of thing, that opportunity. So really try to do as much as you can, but don't get stressed about it. Just don't limit yourself based on, you know, thinking, you know, oh, I'm too good for this job or something like that. Apply to the jobs that you think you can get, and even the ones you think you can't get, because you never know what's going to happen.
And I would just add on to that, it's actually good to have jobs that you take that you actually don't like, because then you know what you don't like and what you do like. You might have thought you wanted to do something, and then you do it and you're like, yeah, this is not for me. So it's good to have, you know, experience different jobs out there as well. Yeah,
exactly. Like the job that I'm in right now is not related to our program at all, really. It's still environmental science, but it's not really related to the business sustainability aspect of it. And I love it. So I never would have expected myself to be in this job, but I am, and I love it. So the unexpected things will come, so just be open to that.
Yeah, excellent.
Just another quick thing to add on to the already great points that have been discussed. Something that really helped me in my first round of co-op applications was taking advantage of upper year students, especially in the environment and business program, but also any other upper year mentors or leaders that I knew, just because they're an amazing resource. They've already gone through maybe multiple rounds of co-op applications, and they can also help you to maybe tweak your resume or give you a bit of advice for a cover letter that you're writing. So I really thought that was a great resource that helped me in my applications, and they can tell you their experiences about maybe interviews that they've had or different rounds of applications that they've done. So I think that's a really great resource to have.
Yeah, for sure. And also another point is you don't have to use Waterloo Works to find a job. You can look for your own job. So you can network yourself. You know, if you have family, friends, or something that, you know, are working somewhere that interests you, you can just contact them, see if they would like to hire a co-op, and kind of take it upon yourself to get to the positions that you want to be in. I have gotten multiple outside jobs not using Waterloo Works. So if you have the time to do that and look into other options that are not available in Waterloo Works, I would strongly suggest doing that and networking yourself that way.
Hey, that's great. Thank you, panelists. Some great insights there. Maybe for our last question, we have a couple minutes left before we're going to be wrapping up. The last question that it was one from Callista, And what are some of the examples? So Sam, you mentioned the job that you're currently in, but maybe we could hear what are some of the other jobs that students typically have access to through co-op? So you could speak about your own experience, for example. Maybe we'll just go through each of the panelists, and just a brief comment each would be great. Lauren?
Yeah, co-op has been really great for me just because of the range of experiences I've gotten to take. So I've taken a mix of co-op jobs. One co-op job I did was with a tech startup company, and that was really a data and analytical role. And although I did like it, I did kind of prefer roles that had more of that environmental or sustainability component. And my last two co-ops have actually been related to government positions related to renewable energy and programming and funding for Indigenous communities throughout Canada. So I've from a chance switch in my co-op applications and an interview that I had for my second last co-op, I found something that I was super interested in that I really didn't know that much about. And now it's something that I'm really catering the rest of my university courses to, and maybe possible master's options too. So it really can switch your whole perspective just from one different co-op term that you have.
Yeah, so I just done one term so far. I'm in my 2B, so it's my summer term between two co-op terms. My first term back in the winter, I was with a manufacturing company. They made barbecues, and I did customer service for them, like a call center job, pretty standard first kind of co-op. Didn't get too much chance to contribute, but my second co-op, which will be this fall, I'll be working with Petropoulos lubricants in Mississauga, doing some data work in their environment, health, and safety department. So I had like a very, very business type, not very sustainability focused, and now I have one that's more of like the sustainability within the corporation focus.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bennett. Sam?
Yeah, so my first co-op I found outside of Waterloo Works at a consulting company doing, mostly environmental science stuff like hydrogeology, kind of assessing where, like, it's not really related to our program, but I found it really challenging and really interesting because it's, consulting is very high-paced environment that you're working in. So that job I have now, I'm actually doing it again. I returned for my last co-op, and I enjoy it because it has the option of doing field work as well as doing in-office work and data analysis. And there's a lot of chemistry involved in the job, water quality assessment and stuff like that. So even though our program is not directly related to the kind of environmental science portion of it, that's still a very open possibility that you can get into those types of things if that's what interests you. And there's also a lot of earth science courses at at Waterloo that you can take. So you're not really restricted to the courses within the environment faculty. You can branch out and kind of, wherever your career takes you or these co-ops take you, you can take courses that align with the jobs that you want. And then also I had a job working at a pharmaceutical company implementing their environmental management system. You guys will have a course on that. That was very related to the program. It was literally exactly what MBUS is. And I found it fun, but it wasn't challenging enough for me. So I decided to stick with the consulting route. So I'm doing that now. And I also took one co-op off, which is an option to all of you. Would not recommend doing that in your first or second because if you can't find a job in the next term, then you're kind of screwed in that aspect. So later on in like your third and fourth co-ops, if you want to take a co-op off to either regroup or to travel or to get involved in different things, you can. That option is also available as well.
Thanks, Sam. Those are all really great, great experiences to share, and thanks so much. For where we are now, this wraps up our live chat, and we're so happy that our attendees, you could join us today. Thank you so much for the great questions. I hope that you are feeling excited and empowered that we're here to support you in your journey that you're embarking on at the University of Waterloo. A special thank you to our panelists, to Cheri, to Lauren, Bennett, and Sam. Thank you for sharing your time, expertise, and knowledge with all of us. And special thank you to both Leslie and Lee May for helping facilitate the discussion. So I wish you all a pleasant day, and we look forward to seeing you in September. Thanks so much.
Bye.